Scoot. Hello friends, and welcome back to another end of year video. Today's video, there's a couple things I would like to look at with you guys. For one thing, I would like to briefly talk about my December wrap-up, all the books that I read this month, which right now is 7. By the end of the year, I would like it to be 9, so I've got a couple more days to catch up. But then on top of that, I would also like to go through my Goodreads and or storygraph and just show you guys my stats for the year. Because I saw people post stuff like this last year, but I hadn't read any books, so I had nothing to contribute. But now, I've got lots to show, so we're just gonna go through it. And my apologies for the questionable lighting. I'm currently trying to bulk record a bunch of videos just because I picked up some end of year shifts, which means if I don't record these all right now, I probably will not have time to get them done and out before the end of the year. So we're working with what we've got. We're appreciating the fact that my hair is very fluffy today. Looking good. Let's get into it. First of all, my December wrap-up. Very briefly, as of right now, I've read 7 books. I'm currently in the middle of The Queen of the Damned and The Uncensored Picture of Dorian Gray. Very scholarly of me. And I have my reading plans set up to where I should finish those before 2023. But I started this month by finishing up The Chronicles of Narnia. I read The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, The Silver Chair, and The Last Battle. For The Voyage of the Dawn Treader, I thought it was pretty cool, but I still didn't care much for all the political parts. Anything that has to do with government in those books and all the talk from all the higher-ups, I did not care at all. And for that reason, this book was a little bit boring, but I may have cried at the ending just a little bit. For The Silver Chair, I really like that they threw in an actual quest, because that wasn't really something that they had before, and I think it really added a cool element where you're trying to will the characters to stay on track, even if they're going way all over the place. In between that and the final book, I read The Vampire Lestat, which is the second book in the Vampire Chronicles. By far, it has the most tabs out of the 3, just because I love a book that has a musician. I love a book where the main character is creating something and they're passionate about it, and you get to hear about that from them. You get to see just how deeply they care about this thing that they're making and that they're putting out. Because I love relating to characters that feel like that. I love the way that you learn a bunch of different backstories, but they're all connected through his experience of meeting these people. So it wasn't confusing to me. I wasn't just getting a bunch of characters thrown in my face, which is something I will talk about with the final book. I say final as in final out of those 3, because I've learned today that it's a 15-book series, and I'm still not entirely sure if I'm going to finish it or not. Then I read The Last Battle, which I think was an okay end. I do wish it wasn't so abrupt, though. I wish we had a little bit more time to deal with what happens. The 5th book I read this month, and the 100th book that I read this year, was Daisy Jones and the Six by Taylor Jenkins Reid. And it gave me the same vibes as The Vampire Lestat, just because it's about a 1900s rock band. Again, with the passion of people who are creating and putting things out into the world. And Taylor Jenkins Reid is really, really good at making stories that feel real. I do think the twist in this and Seven Husbands was a little bit out of nowhere. I didn't really understand what it added to the story, but overall it was really good. There are a lot of heavier topics, so definitely be careful if you're going into this book, but I think it is something that everybody can relate to in some way, because you have characters dealing with addiction, you have characters dealing with relationship problems, people who are struggling to be decent parents, people who are struggling to be decent children, something for everybody. I feel very formal in this video, I don't know why, just because I have a lot that I want to get through. I read The Haunting of Hill House, No Longer Human, and then The Uncensored Picture of Dorian Gray, all for a video in which Kaylin picked my books, so if you want to see what I thought about that, go to that video. And then right now I'm reading the 3rd book in the Vampire Chronicles, and my thoughts so far is that I think if it was a standalone book, it would be really cool, because you're getting all these stories of how these people are interacting, and it all comes together in the end. But as the 3rd book in a series, it feels really out of nowhere. It feels like you're being introduced to a bunch of characters who you've never heard of before, or you have no real connection, and then they're all just kind of brought into this plot that you have never heard of before, which as a 3rd book, I feel like you definitely could have mentioned the conflict that comes up. The whole thing that this book is coming towards is not really mentioned throughout the first 2 books, and I feel like the first 2 books were successful, and so this new conflict was created that had never been heard of before, just to keep the story going. And that's something that I've heard about this series, is it kind of just gets worse as you go along, so that's why I'm not sure if I'm going to continue, but I do still love the original characters, so we'll see. But now we get to do something fun. I'm not even going to try to screen record, because I don't think my phone or computer could handle it. My phone is so full of videos right now. Working overtime. So I'm just gonna screenshot what I'm saying, because otherwise we will be here all night, and I just can't do that right now. So I would like to briefly, very briefly, look at my Goodreads, because really what I want to look at is storygraph. I started my Goodreads account in May of this year, but I did add all the books that I had read previously, and my ranking system has changed drastically since I first started, because obviously I had less books to compare to, so I was ranking books really high that now I probably would say were like 3 stars. But in the moment I was saying they were 4 or 5 stars, just because that's all I knew. But on Goodreads I have an average of 3.92, and it says I've read 100 books out of my goal of 55, which means I'm 182% and I'm 46 books ahead of schedule, which I have read more than 100, but because The Vampire Chronicles is 3 books, I counted it as 1 in Goodreads and 3 separate ones in Storygraph, just because I was already tracking the full 3 books in Goodreads before I decided to split them up, and I didn't feel like getting rid of it. I would just love to find my stats. I will say if you're thinking of tracking your books, I would use storygraph just because I feel like it's a lot more specific. You can get a lot more detailed with your descriptions and with your categorization of books. And I also think it just gives you a lot more information about the books when you're looking at the stats and everything like that. And really quickly, I am just going to add these 2 books that I'm in the middle of just so we can get the final results because we're manifesting it. I'm gonna read these books by the end of the year. So I'm gonna pretend that I've read all of these even though we're not quite there. So I will take them off as soon as this video is done and put them back on when it's actually real, which that does mean that they won't have ratings. That's the one thing that won't be in this, but for reference, I think you can already kind of tell where I would put them just by how I've talked about them. I think The Queen is at a solid like 3 point something stars because it's a decent story on its own, but again, in a series doesn't make a lot of sense. If you're gonna switch it up, you gotta go all the way. And then The Picture of Dorian Gray, I haven't gotten very far into it, but I've underlined on almost every single page. I don't know how memorable it will be, but as a reading experience, it is incredible. So that would probably be one of the higher books up in the year. The first thing it shows you is all the books that you read, how many pages were in them, and the overall mood of them. And this year, in 2022, I read 104 books for a total of 37,008 pages, which I'm very, very bad at math, so I'm just gonna 1 second. I promise I have a college degree. Yeah, that's over 100 pages a day, unless I'm still very bad at math. But considering how many days of the year I didn't read anything, I'd say that's fairly impressive. Because for the first like 3 months of the year, I didn't read anything. And my main things in here, which this is not at all surprising, 42 emotional books, 38 dark books, 36 adventurous, 31 mysterious, 25 reflective, and then we get into hopeful, lighthearted, funny. So I definitely read a lot of dark books. A lot of the adventurous books are things like maybe the Chronicles of Narnia, The Fifth Wave, Twilight, Death Note, the Maze Runner series, the Red Queen series. It's all the younger series that I read in March when I was trying to get myself back into reading. But if I look at emotional, which there is some overlap, they can go into more than one category, I think. I could be wrong, but I think I'm seeing some of these more than once. But I'm looking at emotional, I'm seeing stuff like The Bell Jar, Looking for Alaska, Genderqueer, Crying in H Mart, Loveless, A Little Life, It Starts With Us and It Ends With Us. A lot of those are books that I've read in the later half of the year just because I've kind of been honing in on the certain book. How is the Infinite Sea in all 3 of these categories? Tell me why the Infinite Sea is emotional, dark, and adventurous. I promise it was none of those things. I don't remember what I was saying, so we're going to the next one, which is the pace of books. Oh, just kidding. What I was gonna say is, in the last half of the year, I've really figured out what type of book I like. I've been really into dark academia. I've been really into books that just question humanity, where the character is just trying to figure out what's the point to anything. And I really like characters that are passionate about whatever it is that they're doing. Characters that want to feel like they matter, which is all kind of the same thing, and all to say that I probably need to go to therapy. The next section is pace. I read 20 slow books, 30 fast books, and then 54 medium books, which is oddly evenly split. 50% medium-paced books, and then fast and slow were kind of... I've got range, people. I don't know what to tell you. I'm in a weird mood today. I've been recording too much. I read 38 books that are less than 300 pages. That is actually really surprising because I very deeply love long books. I love connecting with characters over a long period of time. But it is because I just read a lot of children's books. Again, all of Narnia. Even stuff like The Bell Jar, Oscar Wilde. Oscar Wilde is the author, not the book, but you know what I mean. I didn't realize how short a lot of these books are. 55 books between 300 and 500 pages. That's kind of the average length of a book that people are willing to read. And then I read 10 books that were over 500, which in 1 year, that's a lot of pages, right? Like I would like to make that more next year because I really do enjoy long books that you can really just dig into the characters in their lives. And those 10 books are Midnight Sun, No Longer Human, King's Cage, Tilt, A Little Life, It, Warstorm, The Priory of the Orange Tree, The Nightingale, and The Secret History, which I think something needs to be said about the star ratings for them. 4 stars, 4 stars, 3.75, 4 stars, 5 stars, 5 stars, 3.75, 3.75, 4.75, and 5. Obviously there are some that are a little bit in the mediocre range, but for the most part, I really enjoyed those books. I only read 3 nonfictions, and they were all memoirs. It was We Are Not Broken, Genderqueer, and Crying in H Mart. That is something I desperately need to change next year. I really need to read more nonfiction. I really don't like the genres chart just because things can only go into one category at once. So if something is categorized as race, it can't also be in the memoir section, I think. unless there is overlap in this as well, but I don't know. I don't really have anything to say about this, but my top genre was young adult, and then fantasy, contemporary, horror, literary, and classics. I definitely did not expect fantasy to be the second highest one, but to be fair, I don't know how much I trust the categorization of these books, so we're gonna scroll past that. My most read authors are all the series. Again, I feel like that really skewed the results of this, and I'm excited to see what next year is gonna be, just because it'll be more books that I wanted to read and not just series that I was catching up on, because my most read authors are Death Note, Narnia, Red Queen, Maze Runner, Junji Ito. The only one that isn't an actual series is just a bunch of separate books from a cool author. Then Miss Peregrine's Home, The Fifth Wave, Anne Rice's Vampire Chronicles, Twilight, and then Daniel Vega, which is over there with The Haunted and The Unleashed. So all but one of these are series and have nothing to do with the fact that I enjoy these authors. It was more just nostalgia reading. That is really frustrating, but it's okay. And then this is something I really like to look at. It's the number of books and pages per each month. And I think it's really fun just because every other month I was reading a lot and then a little bit. And it's like, you can see in March and April, I peaked with reading. That was when I first started getting back into it. So I was just really going all in. Then in May and June, it kind of fizzled out. And then July, it peaked really high. And then August, it went way down. September it was up, October it was down, November it was up, and now December, and it's down again. I just think it's really interesting to see how I probably push myself way too hard and read too many books and then get a little bit burnt out from reading. And that's probably why it looks like that, and ideally it would be a little bit more consistent, but it also could just be because I dedicate those months to reading longer books. But it would be cool to see more consistency in this and to see me reading roughly the same number of books each month, just because this is a little bit excessive. Going from 15 to 4 and then back up to 13. I think I might need to calm down a little bit. And then you can see my star ratings, which peaks nicely at 4 and then kind of levels out on either side, which again, I spent the later half of this year figuring out the types of books that I liked, so a lot of them did get higher ratings. And I have gone through a couple of times and changed some star ratings just so that it makes sense overall, because there's some books that I rated high that now when I look back at it, I know for a fact that other books would be rated higher, but not any higher than the books above those. I don't know if I worded that right, but basically, my standards have changed, and I've changed my ratings throughout the year as I went. Because now that I kind of have a baseline for books and my standards, I will hopefully change them less, because I will just have my rating and I'll know what I thought of this book. So this was kind of the year of test run. I don't know how much it reflects my actual reading, just because, like I keep saying, all the books that I read at the start of this year, they really skewed the results, but I'm not mad about that because I did still read them. It does still show my journey through reading those books and discovering my love for books again. It's been a good year for me. I do think jumping in and reading 100 books in 9 months was very ambitious of me. Probably not something that I should aim to do again, because a lot of people that I watch do this as a full-time job, so they have the time to read books because that's literally what they're getting paid to do. But I just do this as a fun hobby, and I definitely overwhelm myself sometimes with how many things I want to get done and the level that I want to be at. So I think my goal for next year, it's not going to be about the numbers, it's just about taking more time to appreciate these books instead of trying to cram in as many as I can just for these videos, because this is all just good fun for me. So I think I'm gonna go. If you made it this far into the video, thank you so much for watching. I do plan on posting every day for the rest of the year, so if you want to stick around for that, or if you want to go back and watch my earlier Vlogmas videos, go explore the channel. It means a lot that you've been here this year. I'm excited to see what books I read next year. But with all that being said, I will see you guys in tomorrow's video. Bye.